it's their sort of constituents, it's the poorer people who would have the most to gain.
And so talking about that, I mean, earlier on before we started the interview, we were talking about the welfare state and, you know, who this provided an advantage to, whether it was to the poorer, those in the state, and, you know, we just talked about inflation, how really everyone's suffering from that, but it must be the working classes, those on lower wages, who with less savings, who aren't really being encouraged to save or pay off debts, that are really suffering. But not only are they suffering with their money, the welfare state, it seems, from your opinion, is also not benefiting them a huge amount either.
Yes, I mean, what we've done since 1911 and since the National Insurance Act, which incidentally came in on the 16th of December 1911, so we're nearly exactly to the day, 100 years from that.
Wow.
With the creation of the National Insurance Act and its adverse impact on traditional forms of collective welfare, but without the state, things like the mutual funds, friendly societies, all those, and the cooperatives, and then everything that then happened in the 1920s and 1940s, late 1940s under that Labour government, that sort of edifice of that what I call the Dickensian welfare state, for all the hundreds of billions of pounds that have been spent, well, what have we ended up with? We've ended up again with increasingly high unemployment, increasing levels of child poverty, and a system that benefits politicians, enables them to deficit finance, and to make promises, to issue cheques at elections, which increasingly 100 years on, it turns out they can't cash. So, you know, yes, the state will give you education, yes, the state will do your healthcare, yes, the state will do everything. Well, actually, now we realise that, for example, my state pension was going to be arriving at 65, now it's going to arrive at 67. By the time I get there, it might, if I'm lucky, arrive at 70 or 75. You know, the state was going to do all healthcare.
Yes.
Yeah? And it nationalised 3,118 independent homes, hospitals and clinics to create the NHS. Yet what do we have today? We have 6 or 7 million people with private medical insurance. We have another 6 million people with private health cash plans. We have millions of people, again, paying privately for their dentistry. We have in excess of 200,000 people a year self-funding for their surgery or for treatment. And we increasingly see companies like Virgin or supermarkets starting to launch again healthcare coverage products, because actually we all know the state isn't there. Our state hospitals are filthy. We know that there are a lot of often long waiting lists. My wife was very ill a couple of years ago. We live in central London. She's a nurse in the NHS and she rang for an ambulance. Oh, I'm afraid no ambulance is available. That's the reality that people face. Well, could we have an ambulance in an hour or two? No, we can't guarantee that. That's the reality. So, you know, often the state, this edifice of the state, is there in the name of the poor, the less well off. But the harsh reality is that the state is often the most brutal to people who do have humble means. So, again, just to go back to the NHS, the average person in Britain, when an articulate, professional person goes to their GP, on average, they get 40% more resources per illness episode than someone from a skilled or unskilled manual background, who might be less pushy, less articulate, less confident with a doctor.
Okay.
That's an enormous disparity.
Yeah.
We saw figures last year that in excess of 20% of NHS patients are malnourished. This is extraordinary for the £100 billion a year we're spending.
Yeah.
You know, I can't conceive of any charity or any private sector company that could begin to do things so unequally or so badly.
Absolutely, and I suppose you can kind of relate that back to what we were just saying about currencies. You know, if privately they were issuing it, then they wouldn't have been able to get away with it. There wouldn't be demand for the NHS if it was privately run. We were aware of what we were paying for every day, and we had more options, more choices.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because, you know, why do politicians, why does the Prime Minister, why do, whatever system you have, you know, why does the monarch, whatever that monarch is, why does the monarch always want to control the currency? Why do they want that monopoly? They want it so that they can deficit finance, and through deficit financing they can always, through things like bonds, raise more money than they have. They can make promises that might later become difficult for other subsequent politicians.
Such as inflation.
Exactly. Why do they want it? They want it for power. Often, sometimes they want it so they can go to war.